Okay, welcome everybody to a special edition of Let's Talk About You with Shannon Q. And the reason why this is a little bit of a special edition is for the fact that normally Shannon obviously has a one-on-one conversations with people and she gets to know them and interviews them and talks to them and just has a polite, casual conversation in the way that she's known to do. But of this particular case, last night we on my channel with the Geek Room and Kyle Curtis had taken a little bit of a jab at Eric's video here. Eric is from THiNKeasy. He is a young creationist. No spoilers, but that much Shannon already knows. So I don't want to tell her too much about him, obviously, but he has watched the video we did last night, and he didn't run away screaming. So I already think that he might be one of my favorite young earthers of all time, if that's the case. So what I'm going to be doing though is
cheers, Steve. Yeah.
Hey, any drink like
cheers.
Come on, this guy's cool already.
No one ever drinks with me on these. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah,
oh wow.
No alcohol tonight for me. Stomach can't take it. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the science of one of his videos called "A Universe from Nothing" or "Universe Out of Nothing." I believe that was the title. And we'll get into
it was the universe from nothing.
Universe from nothing. Yes, exactly. So, obviously, I'm not an expert on general relativity. I know a little bit because I have a little bit of physics under my belt and a little bit of science. But if we really wanted to get deep in that, I will definitely allow some people to come in later on, maybe if Shannon's okay with that, some astrophysicist or something. But we're going to get this started. And Shannon, go ahead and take it away. Introduce yourself, what you do, and then Eric, introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shannon Q. And I am from the Heathen Hour podcast on Godless Geranium's channel. And also I work with Pelagia on the Pelagia channel. And I have a YouTube channel that's just filled with playlists of things, of content that I help produce on other channels. And I'm not familiar with Eric, but Steve said that we would have an interesting conversation. And I like having conversations with people who hold positions or ideologies that differ from mine. And I guess I'll throw it to you, Eric, so that you can explain who you are and what made you brave enough to come here after apparently, I didn't watch the video, but apparently you got kind of roasted, I guess, last night on Steve's channel with the Geek Room. So why don't you tell me what your opinion is on that and what made you so brave to come here?
Sure. Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it. And thanks again, Steve, for having me. Well, I'm Eric from THiNKeasy is my YouTube channel. I started out doing beer reviews, and I just love craft beer, and I just review them and just kind of give you my opinions on them. But it turned into a little more than that. It turned into Christian apologetics. I'm a Christian, and like Steve said, I'm a young earth creationist, I guess. Like that is a conviction that I hold, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I also do other things too. So I'm an entertainer, I suppose. So I like to do short films. I like to do tutorials on filmmaking, lighting, any sort of thing like that. So I'm a broadcast journalist by trade, and I just love media. I love the cinema. I love Christianity, and I love craft beer. And so what made me brave enough, I suppose, to come on the channel today is it's true. Steve contacted me by email and actually asked me to come on yesterday. I had to work late, so I wasn't able to, but I caught the video this morning. And honestly, if I could give my honest opinion, I felt like Steve was kind of the only voice of reason in that chat room.
You can say that again. That one more time. That's fine.
So, no, you only got a one, Steve. So,
sorry, Geek Room.
Yeah, the Geek Room, like, all power to you. You were funny, I suppose. It reminded me a lot of a time when I was in high school and I was just getting drunk with my friends and just doing all sorts of horrible things. Obviously, I wasn't a Christian growing up, but I had a complete depraved mindset, and I was saying and doing everything that they were doing. And yeah, I suppose it was funny, but it wasn't really scientific, or it wasn't really helpful at all. So I felt like it was more of an entertainment value video. It was more of a reaction video than a serious response video. I felt like Steve had some good points in his video, and he said some things that were helpful and things that I'm hoping to prod a little bit and maybe give a little bit of pushback. But I've just never really shied away from things like that. So it's not really about bravery. It's just about, you put yourself out there on a social platform like this, and you're going to get pushback, and you got to be ready to deal with the consequences. So I don't really have any qualms about coming on and doing something like this, trying to defend what has been refuted, I suppose.
Wow, that's fantastic. Good for you. Okay, so I found out that you're a young earth creationist before we went on. Usually I don't know anything about the person that I'm about to talk to. I don't know if you realize that, but generally I'm just kind of surprised by the person I'm about to talk to. But I have found out that you're a young earth creationist. You're obviously a Christian because you've just professed to being a Christian. What was interesting to me is that you said you weren't always a Christian. So this is something that you came to later in life?
Right. Yes, I didn't grow up. Okay, long story short.
Sure.
I grew up in a household that was not Christian, never went to church, never read a Bible. I moved away to Germany when I was 19 or 18, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And when I was there, I was just kind of getting into some really just awful things, just like really immoral things. And so I was kind of seeking to earn points with whatever God might be out there. I always thought there was a God.
Okay.
Maybe I wasn't a Christian, but I thought maybe there was some sort of God.
So you had like an innate feeling that there was something that you had to reconcile?
Prodding. Yeah. I had a prodding that I was just not moral, that I was doing things that were just awful. And so I needed to kind of tip the scales per se, like I believe that if you're good enough to go to heaven, then maybe you'd make it to heaven, that sort of thing.
Right.
So I kind of read the Bible for myself, and there's a little passage in Matthew 7 where Jesus essentially says, anyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, but does not do the things that I command of him or obey my Father's commandments is not really one of mine, and I will say to them, I never knew you. And that's when I realized that I was not a Christian, that I was a faker. And that's when I heard the gospel for the first time, and where I believed that I had the born again experience. So that's when I became a Christian in 2010, when I was 19 years old.
Wow. Okay. So you said you had an innate sort of feeling that you were engaging in immoral behavior. Were you well, I don't want to ask you things that are too personal. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Please.
Yeah.
Oh, you're okay?
Go ahead,
okay.
I'm fine. Yeah.
So you said you were doing things that you felt like were kind of innately immoral, or like you had a personal internal feeling that they were immoral. Do you think that could have been just your own innate sense of morality, or a sense of social morality? What made you feel compelled towards specifically Christianity as the counterpoint to that?
Right. Okay. So I'll be a little intellectually honest here and say that I was never an atheist. I never believed that there was no God. Okay. And in my culture, when I grew up, it predominantly was Christian. Okay. So the Christian God was all I knew at that time. Sure. And so that's the one I obviously explored first. And so the question obviously comes up from that is, why the Christian God? Why not other gods?
Right.
And I believe, right. Yeah. I mean, I explored other gods too, definitely not to the depth that those other religions would want me to. It's definitely respectful to study other religions before you try to refute them. But I tried to study as much as I could. And what I found in my multi-year study is that I felt that Christianity, although it was the first religion I came to, was the most reasonable and had the most answers to all the questions I had. And there were problems with other religions that I just couldn't reconcile. And so that's why I landed on Christianity and stayed with Christianity. Okay.
So you said that Christianity helped to answer some questions for you. So what types of questions?
What types
did
of
it
questions?
Answer? Yeah. That nothing else could answer for you.
I mean, one of the universal questions of like, why are we here? Why is anything here? Why are we doing any of this? Why do we have morals? And why do we all have this innate sense of something's not right? Every religion out there has some sort of redemption. They have some sort of idea of what we call sin.
Right.
It's the idea that we're not right with the world. And
Sure.
in the Muslim religion, they do have a scale system where if you're more good than bad, then you go to heaven. In,
Sure.
let's say, like a Buddhist religion, like if you don't have enough good karma versus bad karma, then you're not going to reincarnate as something else or never reach nirvana. There's always some sense that something is wrong with us.
Mhm.
And Christianity, in my opinion, answered the question of why that is and what the answer is. All those other religions,
Right.
they work on some sort of a workspace system. You have to work out your bad karma, work out your sins so that you can be good enough. Christianity is vastly different than the rest, that they have essentially an atonement, that somebody else who is perfect dies in your place for your sins, so that you recognize you can't do it on your own and that somebody else dies in your place.
But
That
couldn't that
is-
also be viewed as the other religions, and not to, I have a couple of things to say towards that, if you don't mind giving me a few minutes to
Sure.
decompress what you just said. So
Yeah.
a couple things. The fact that you mentioned that many other religions have a sense or have written in a sort of a code of morality, or have made mention to some sort of type of moral system, and they've all been established in many different places without the link of communication that would be required for them to have consensus. That I feel like would speak to the fact that a sense of morality is perhaps a bit more of a social construct than it's necessarily a religious construct. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to those ideals independently. And secondly, it sounds almost like Christianity holds an answer that might be conceived to be easier than the others, because you mentioned that the others, you require a certain sense of atonement. So you have to essentially kind of work off the deficits, that your moral deficits, whereas in Christianity, you can have them shunted off because somebody else has taken that burden for you. Are either of those fair statements?
Okay, the first one I can address. The second one, I may need a little more elaboration.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
Why don't I address the first one first? The fact that it could be a social construct, maybe,
Okay.
possibly. I don't doubt that it could be.
Because how else
But-
could they all have come to relatively
pro-
similar moral systems independently?
Right. The problem that I have is that there are cultures and there are peoples who have vastly different moralities.
Sure.
And if you attend any philosophy of ethics class, like the capstone project or the capstone statement is basically a big, like, I don't know how to solve morality. Like,
Sure.
we talked about indigenous tribes who used to eat their dead, and for moral reasons, we would look at that and we would just kind of appall that, like that's immoral to us. But in a naturalistic worldview, how do we reconcile what is moral and what is not? So the Christian worldview says that we all have, I don't want to use the word objective because I know some people take offense to that, but a God source morality. Yeah, like I don't understand the qualm with that, but okay, let's just use the word God like sourced morality, where there are definitely certain moral wrongs that everyone agrees on.
Sure.
Do not murder, do not steal, don't cheat on your wife. Well, I don't know,
Right.
maybe some cultures. But those sorts of morals, I would say, I'm not convinced that those can be a social construct, because
But don't murder. But wouldn't those be the ones that were consistent? I mean, there's other sort of like silly ones that are specifically religion based, like don't worship another god but me. Those are strictly based on the individual religion that you choose to adhere to. But things like don't murder, don't steal, don't cheat on a spouse, those types of things, those tend to be come to
right.
in
So
any
the
sort of
more common
religious structure.
ones.
And that's perhaps what I was speaking to, but not as articulately
Right.
as I could have.
Right. No. I think I get it now. So yeah, I suppose it's possible. Maybe.
Because otherwise, how would Buddhism, like Buddhism was formed prior to, or not prior to, but like at least in a different location.
Sure.
Where there wouldn't be a stream of communication where like perhaps Christian morals could have bled in to Buddhism or Hinduism, but those things were still come to. So if the morality was, if that specific type of objective morality is unique to Christianity or has to come from Christianity, and Christianity is the answer, then how were they able to come to it without exposure to Christian morals?
Right. Okay. I understand now.
Okay.
So
sorry if I didn't articulate well before.
No. I think you did. Maybe I just didn't get it first. But I would say that the God of Christianity, the God of the Bible, is the God of all, regardless of what religion you claim, whether it be Buddhism, Hinduism, or Mormonism, whatever. The God is the creator of all human beings, of all mankind, and has instilled those morals into them. And so that even right. So
okay. So because God created all of us, even though we're the ones inventing other religions elsewhere, because even though we haven't been exposed to the ideologies of Christianity, it's innate within us because God created us. So that's why we know that's moral, is because he created us.
So your question
then Christianity is not necessary because we don't need Christianity to adhere to those morals.
Well, here's
even by that logic.
Now, okay, so now you have a 3-layered question that I'm going to have to answer in 3 different ways.
Oh, okay.
So your first layer was that because God created all of us, that I should have written that down. So so can you just quickly restate those kind of objections that you had?
Okay, well, it seemed to me, and I could have been misconstruing what you were saying, was the reason that those other religions came to those specific moral constructs and wrote them into the tenets of their specific religions, even though they didn't have exposure to Christianity, was because God had created those human beings also. And since God created those human beings, he had already instilled that innate morality in them, that innate objective morality, by virtue of creating those humans. And when those humans invented those other religions, they wrote the tenets of that morality into those religions because God had created them also.
Right, let me address
in which
those
case
first.
The Christianity wouldn't be necessary because that morality would be innate irrespective of Christianity existing. Otherwise it wouldn't have, because it's already in us.
All right, so I got those 3 now, so I'll respond to all 3 of them.
Sure, awesome.
So God created them with, yes, an innate sense of morality. Because we are the image of God, that's what Genesis 1 says. It says that in the beginning, God created the male and female. In his image, he created them, right?
Sure.
So what that means is not only the way we look, but it's also the way we are. Because God's instilled his own nature into us. So what God is loving, God is just, God is angry, God is just. Did I say just already?
You did. He's super just. He's like extra just.
He's really just. He's all these different things. And because he created us to image him, so are we. And when we see injustice, when we are not loving, when we do these things that go against God's nature, there's something in us that says it's not right. And especially theologically speaking, with Genesis 3 and the fall of Adam and Eve, that nature was marred and it was twisted. And in some cases, we enjoy the wrong. We enjoy the twisted nature. We enjoy sometimes not being loving. We enjoy sometimes being unjust when it benefits us. And so to some degree, yes, all humans experience that sense of morality because in Christianity, God is the creator of all, and it explains why everyone came to those same conclusions. So to answer your second qualm, why these other people invented other religions, because not only do we need natural revelation, which is the creation, it is the fact that we are here, we have minds, we have morals. That's natural revelation. That differs from special revealed revelation, which is the Bible. It is God's writing. It's the prophets of the Old Testament. And so when Judaism was a religion in, early Palestine, they were the only ones that essentially had it right in our thinking, because God revealed himself to them. And their job was to spread that gospel per se to the world. They didn't do that. So when people don't have special revelation, they try to figure it out on their own, which is why we have the development of all these different religions, because they didn't have God's revelation to tell them who he was. And so it also explains why we have so much religion and so many different religions, because they all have that innate sense of morality that God created them with, and they're trying to figure it out, why they're not satisfied, why they're immoral, why they feel these things.
Okay.
And to your claim, does that make Christianity not necessary? Absolutely not, because the end goal of Christianity is not that we be moral, that we be moral people and follow all his laws. That is definitely a big part of it.
Sure.
But as the Westminster Catechism says, that our main goal in life is to enjoy God and to glorify God and enjoy him forever. The ultimate goal is God's glory, is that he would be glorified. And so when we are moral on our own, that's not cutting it. Like I said.
No, it's not. Okay.
Right. So the standard is perfection. The Bible in the book of John, I believe it says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, none of us can be perfect as God, because that is no sin from the minute we're born to the minute we die. We can't do it. And so the fact that we need to bring ourselves to a place where we recognize that and not be prideful and say that Jesus has to be the one to die on our behalf, that's glorifying God. So even though you may be moral and you may be, have all these awesome things that you do throughout your life that are super moral, in the end, it's not going to cut it, because the standard is perfection.
Interesting.
So
okay.
I hope that answered the 3 qualms that you had, or at least maybe sparked some.
That answer, it helps me understand your interpretation of, absolutely. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
So you feel like it's a decent answer, actually. So you feel like God instills an innate sense of morality in all of us, but it can't be fully realized unless you're a Christian in your logic, or at least not fully realized, and you have the opportunity for an afterlife where you're one with God.
I wouldn't say realized, I would say satisfied, because
can you elaborate on satisfied a little bit? Okay.
Yeah. The issue is that we all feel like something's wrong, right? Because
I don't feel like something's wrong though.
So
seems like a lot.
So let me put it this way. Have you ever felt like you did something wrong?
Yeah, when I do wrong stuff, I feel like that.
So that's what I mean.
Every time I do something wrong, I feel like that was probably wrong.
Right. And have you ever, and I don't mean to get personal here, but have you ever done something wrong where you thought to yourself, I could never repay this. I could never satisfy the guilt that I have for this?
No, I don't think I've ever done anything that wrong that I don't feel like I could somehow atone for it with that individual that I'd wronged. I have burned bridges that the person maybe that no longer wanted to affiliate with me, but I don't think that there's anything that I feel like, the rest of my life I'm going to have to carry this.
Well, and obviously there are scales, or I'm sorry, there are scales, I suppose. I mean, variable degrees of how bad you feel about something. But the reality is that the entire human race, to some degree, feels bad about wrong that they do, and they don't know how to satisfy it. And so that's what I mean by satisfied, is that all these other religions, like I said previously, is that they satisfy that guilt, or that sort of that innate sense that I need to atone for my own sins by working for it, by trying to be better, by trying to do things that kind of atone for that. Christianity is the only one that gives the answer to fully satisfy that, by realizing that Christ died in our place to satisfy the debt, that our debt is paid. A lot of people I know these days have student debt, right? So let's use that as an analogy. A lot of people,
and then I have things to say.
Sure.
Okay.
So a lot of people have student debt, right? They have like this huge weight on their shoulders, and they carry it with them for a long time. Imagine if somebody came and paid off that debt completely. Not only that, but also gave you that same amount in return, so that you're not only in the red, but you're now in the black. You're not only at zero. That's essentially what Christ did for our sin. He took all of our sin.
Right.
he died for it and paid for it, and also gave us his righteousness, so that now when God looks at us through the lens of what Christ did, he sees us as righteous as what Christ, as Christ was. And so that satisfies that sense of something is wrong, and it frees us to be better. So the common
better.
Yeah, so the common misnomer in Christianity is that we have to work for our salvation, that we have to work to be good, and eventually we can make it to heaven.
Yeah.
I don't know if you believe that?
Well, no, because I'm not
Okay.
I don't believe in heaven.
No, but you believe that caricature.
Do I believe that if you've done something wrong, you should work to make it better?
No. I'm just saying that you believe that that's what Christians believe.
Well, here's my problem. Let me kind of see if I'm understanding.
Yeah. Let's rewind.
Yeah, let's reset. So, and I'll kind of use this as an opportunity to explain a bit of one of my main problems with Christian morality, and one of the reasons that I kind of turned away from Christianity.
Sure.
And I think you kind of alluded to it, but I'm not sure if you necessarily intended to. Now, in Christianity, I kind of view the retribution through Jesus as almost a get out of jail free card. And I've made that reference before, where if I, not believing that Jesus has died on the cross for my sins to save me so that I can have retribution for my wrongdoing, like as wonderful and as selfless an act as that is in principle, that means that I don't have to make what I've done right here with the person or the people that I've wronged. That means that I can go over them to God. I cannot have to make it right here. So long as I understand that I did wrong, I can bypass the people here that I've wronged and still get retribution, and still be saved. I can just roll right over what I did because somebody sacrificed themselves so that I have the privilege of not having to do that. I don't have to make it right with them. So long as I make it right with God, doesn't matter what I did to them. I don't have to make that right.
Yeah, so I get that point.
I don't think that's moral.
You said that like 3 times. So
that's because I mean it.
Right. I know, I get it. But the problem is that is a caricature. That is not what Christianity teaches.
How so?
Well, have you ever read Luke 19? And I'm looking it up here. Have you ever read Luke 19, the story of Jesus and Zacchaeus?
I have read the Bible, but I have not memorized it.
Okay. Well, let me.
So refresh me, please.
Let me just kind of give you a quick rundown. I won't read the whole thing, obviously.
Give me a synopsis. Give me the Coles Note version of Luke 19.
There was a tax collector. They're considered to be very immoral people because they cheat people and they steal from people.
Sure.
And Jesus saw this little short man. He was a tax collector named Zacchaeus, and he was hiding in a tree. Okay. And Jesus said, "Hey, I'm gonna eat with you tonight, right?" Sure. So he takes him out to eat, and essentially Zacchaeus repents and he becomes a Christian per se. But the thing that Jesus says to him is really interesting. He says this. Okay, so it says, "But Zacchaeus stood up and said, 'Lord, Lord, here now I give half.'" Okay, sorry, my bad.
It's okay.
Yeah, it says, "Lord, Lord, here now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and I have cheated and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay it back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." Now, the moral there is that Zacchaeus did wrong. Right. Now, he didn't just repent and he didn't just say, "Okay, my sins are forgiven now." But Jesus made it clear that because your heart has shown repentance, that you're trying to fix the wrong that you did, Right. It's the heart
or
issue.
actions. Heart or actions. Important distinction.
I mean, the actions reflect the heart.
Okay,
And
but
and
what's
like
more important in
what's
Jesus'
more
eyes?
in Jesus' eyes,
Heart or actions?
they really shouldn't be separated, because there's another verse in the book of James that says faith without works is dead. Now,
Okay.
what that means is that
So you
your
can't get
works,
retribution through Jesus if you don't make things right on earth.
no, not necessarily.
So
You see,
there's your get out of jail free card.
right,
You don't have
but
to do it. Jesus would like it if you did, but you don't have to.
right, but here's the issue that I'm having with that objection is, and I overuse this analogy, so forgive me for overusing it, but
I forgive you.
let's say somebody has a conviction that they are against animal abuse and they're just going to become a vegetarian, right?
Okay.
So they say, I'm going to become a vegetarian because I hate animal abuse.
Sure.
And then every Friday they have a big old steak and just don't tell anybody. Somebody finds out and says, it's okay because I'm a vegetarian anyway. Well, that doesn't make sense, because the actions don't reflect the heart. By eating that steak, you're showing that you really don't care about animal abuse. You care about the label.
Sure.
And in the same way, in Christianity, if you don't show that you're a Christian by your works, the evidence is that you're not really saved in the first place. The whole book of 1 John is full of tests, of matter-of-fact statements where John is saying, if you do this, you are a Christian. If you don't do this, you are not a Christian. And they're very challenging. So although Christianity does kind of hinge on that fact that Christ atoned for our sins, it's still very equally as careful to say that if you don't work, if you're not showing that salvation, the odds are you're probably not saved, and you have reason to believe that you were never a Christian to begin with.
But wasn't your earlier argument about other religions not fitting the bill that you had to make some sort of atonement in those other religions, whereas in Christianity, Jesus died and took that burden for you?
Right. So the difference
seems
is
like
that
a contradiction in my mind, but I could be misunderstanding.
I see how you could think that. However, the difference between those other religions and Christianity is the what's it called? Like when something comes first and something comes second, the sequence, I suppose, the order of which that happens, the faith and the works. In those other religions, you work first, then you get saved, or you earn credit toward going to heaven. In Christianity, you're saved first. You have a renewed heart, what we call the born again experience, and your sins are forgiven. Your debt is forgiven, and you have Christ's righteousness. Now you're freed up to do those good works because you want to, because you have joy, because your desires and your heart has been changed to such a degree that you want to do those things.
That is incredible. Okay, so I need to process that for a second. So the difference is that in the other religions, you're doing the works so that you can achieve atonement. The difference in Christianity is that once you accept God or Christianity in your heart, that frees you up to do the exact same thing that you would have been doing already in those other religions. But you feel different about it?
So yeah, I can see that. But the issue is that all those things those other religions are doing is, well, I mean, I can't speak for all those other religions, but they're mostly doing good things, you know, things like feeding the poor, or you know, things like that.
Not harming.
Yeah. So those things are good things, but when you're doing it with the motivation to save yourself, is that really moral? And no, they're not. The Christians already saved, so they don't do good works to earn points anymore.
Okay, that's so confusing to me. So you get saved.
Right.
And then you don't have to do any good works because you're saved?
In a very technical and...
You're saved, like, mic drop, gone, saved.
No. I mean, that's not what I've been saying at all, and that's not what the Bible says. It seems like the
same thing. Can you see, like, that might seem like semantics unless it's clarified, like, a lot more? Because I mean, they're doing the same thing. The only difference is that the goal line, like, these guys aren't saved yet, so they're starting here. Christians start here being saved. Good works, good works, good works, good works. The only difference is these ones were saved here. These ones get saved down here.
So you've been to
If
chemistry
they
class
get
in
to
high school,
here and
right?
do nothing, still same end goal, right?
Sure, I get the objection, but you've been to high school chemistry class, right?
I did. I didn't do great.
Right. All right. Well, hopefully you can remember this.
Don't try to get me to explain what a mole is. I won't be able to.
No. When dealing with acid and water, was there a specific order that had to go in order for there not to be catastrophic consequences?
Water then acid, if I'm remembering even remotely.
Well, I don't remember the order either. But the issue is that there is an order, and if one goes before the other and it's incorrect, the results are catastrophic. And in Christianity, when you're trying to do works before you believe you're saved or you believe you're right with God, that's like
a presupposition, though. That's just a presupposition. Oh, you love you're a presuppositionalist, so you're a presuppositionalist.
Well, I am.
You want to add acid to the water if anybody cares. Okay.
I was right. Water percent acid. Yes.
Okay, so you add acid into water, but if you do it the other way around, that's catastrophic. Christianity is the only one that gets the order right, is what I'm saying.
Based on what?
Based on God's
Christianity
revealed, right? So? Based on God's revealed word. And to answer your question, yes, technically, I guess I am a presuppositionalist.
Yeah.
I like.
I'm not covering that. Faux show. Yep.
Well, I applaud you for that. But I honestly don't see the contention. I really don't. I don't understand the objection. So maybe you can try to elaborate a little bit. I understand you're talking about like you start from here, you start from here. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying it's the order. You're not starting from. The order matters
because you're presupposing the Christian God.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why the order matters, because you're presupposing the Christian God.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm a Christian.
So,
I'm not gonna.
Of course, yeah, I know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm well aware. Great, sure. So here's the reasons. One of the main reasons I have these types of discussions. I was a Christian. And these types of questions, the types of questions I'm asking you, are the types of questions that I asked myself, and I couldn't give myself an answer that didn't circulate me back to, because God. I couldn't give myself good, solid answers to any of these questions and tell myself that I was intellectually being honest about the way I was looking at things, especially when it came to looking at origins of the world. And when I read through the Bible, I had a great amount of dissonance because I encountered things, particularly as I was going through the Old Testament, that were just diametrically opposed to what my internal construct was of what it meant to be moral. And I couldn't reconcile myself with that. And then when I got to the New Testament, I was like, okay, well, this is a bit more flowery, and I kind of, I can find myself.
Have you read the book of Revelation?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not much better.
No, it's not. But that's the thing, though, right? And that was future projection. So it was easier for me to reconcile myself with that because, that's probably going to happen. That could be a million years from now, right? Not my problem. But the history part of reconciling it with history, reconciling it with science, reconciling it with morality. And then I went and talked to people and they said, well, you don't really have to worry about the Old Testament. You need to just focus on the New Testament. And I was like, well, then why is there an Old Testament? Did God not say any of that stuff? Does that stuff not matter? Why'd we even include that in this book? Why did I bother reading it? It was a really long book. I just wasted a bunch of time if that's the case. So these.
Hey, I applaud you for reading. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't even get some Christians to read it. It's
99 cents on Kobo. You can get the King James Bible for 99 cents on Kobo in case anybody's watching. That's where I read it.
You didn't read it in the King James.
Yeah. It said, why are you NIV? Because I've read that. I've read a good chunk of that too.
No,
are you NIV? What are you?
Okay, so maybe I didn't say this in my introduction, but part of my channel and my YouTube channel also deals with textual criticism.
Okay.
That's also probably one of my most.
Okay.
In a little while, okay? So let's finish this conversation first, and I'd love to go there because that's my primary interest.
Okay, sure. Keep going.
But I'm very I respect the King James for its history and where it came from and what it's done in church history, but
Sure.
it is severely outdated, not only in its language, but in its manuscript support.
How
And
does that?
so
Okay. Manuscript support. Okay. Those are
manuscript support.
That's a statement I haven't heard before when people criticizing the King James Bible. So it's
Well,
interesting.
anyway, so the fact that you read it in the King James, I can already just
And NIV.
it's a testament to your character that you would actually finish it in the King James. I can't get some Christians to finish it in the NIV. So
The NIV is a lot more reader friendly. I will. Yeah. It's in,
right,
it's almost in English.
I would also have issues with the NIV too.
Okay.
So, anyway, all that to say, you were talking about all these things for why you were, rejecting the faith and
Right.
like just kind of not being able to reconcile those things.
Sure. Still can't.
Right.
I tried really hard.
Sure. So I would say to your initial objection was that you couldn't reconcile this morality of atonement. Is that right? Like
that was one of morality on several levels. The morality of atonement. I didn't like that because I felt like it was a get out of jail free card.
Right,
And
because
and specifically that what I saw how I saw God conducting himself in the Old Testament was a huge issue with me.
Sure. So let's deal with those two quickly. The reason I believe, and honestly, like I can't speak to your conscience because I don't know what you're thinking or what you're feeling.
Sure.
But honestly, the reason I believe most people have an issue with the atonement model is because the alternative is working it out yourself.
I'm fine with that.
Right. And the fact is God is not. So the reason God decided to use that model is because you can't work it out yourself. And if you can't work it out yourself, then no one's getting saved. Right. So if he's ever going to display his attributes of love, mercy, forgiveness, he has to be able to do that in a model where you don't work it out yourself. Like the book of Romans in chapter 5, it says, for the worker, his wages are his due. But for the one who doesn't work, his righteousness is counted as a gift. And that's what salvation is. It's a gift. You don't earn a gift. It's given to you.
Right.
So the fact that you want to work out your salvation is essentially a slap in God's face because he's offered you a model that, and I'm not trying to insult you, but this is like the philosophy of Christianity.
I don't believe in God, so I'm not super affected.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. But that is what Christianity teaches, right? It's by Christ's stripes or his wounds that you are healed, not by your own.
So can you elaborate on that? Because that's difficult. Trying to be a good person and do good works is a slap in God's face because he's already given you retribution.
When you're trying to do that to save yourself and to be moral enough to satisfy God's law, yes, because you can't do it. You're marred by sin in such a way that you're not able to do it on your own.
This is confounding. So why try then?
Well, you don't try. You rely on Christ's sacrifice to save you first.
Well, then you don't
then you do those. But then you do those good works afterward. You do the good works afterward, and you do it out of joy because you're not trying to meet a standard. You're not trying to.
But you still are as a person. Can you honestly tell me, intellectually, like psychologically, honestly tell me that when you're doing good things and when you're speaking to me now, you're not thinking to yourself, I'm hoping that this is pleasing to God. I hope that this. Well, then you're screwed.
Absolutely. well, the phraseology you
gotta stop trying to please God.
Well, hold on. The phraseology that you used is pleasing to God, not satisfying my own debt to God. That's different. It's different when you're trying to pay back somebody that you owe and trying to please somebody that you love. Would you not agree that that is very different?
Right. Okay.
So,
sure.
All right, let me give you an example. If I owe my landlord $600 because I maybe didn't get a check this week or something, and trying to do good things for that person to try to get them to not evict me is very different than trying to love my wife because I just love her and want to do good things for her. And hopefully she's pleased by that. Those are two very different things.
Right. Okay. So God wants you to love him first. If you're just a good person because you're a good
it's not only about being a good person. It's not about being a good person.
You have to be a good person because you love him, not be a good person because you just want to be a good person.
If you just want to be a good person for the sake of saving yourself, then yeah, that's like trying to pay back your landlord that's going to evict you.
Right, because your intentions aren't to be...
Your intentions aren't pure. You're doing something out of a selfish motive. But if you're doing something because you're not paying off a debt, you're doing it just because you want to.
From your perspective, when you're doing good things, you're not doing it because you want to earn favor with God. Now you're doing it because you love God, because you know you've already earned his favor because you've chosen Christianity.
Exactly. Just in the same way that I would want to do something loving to my wife or a family member or a friend. Okay. I don't have to worry about my relationship with them.
I'm just trying to understand your reasoning. So let me paraphrase again so that I can make sure that because I don't want to have a conversation with you where we're talking past each other.
Sure.
And I'm probably going to paraphrase almost exactly the same thing that I just said. And it's just because I want to make sure that I understand.
Sure.
So you accepted God. The moment you accepted God and accepted that Jesus had sacrificed himself for you, everything you do after that, the intention that you put towards that action is not because you want to earn favor in God's eyes. It's because you love God, and this is in some way a tribute to that love as opposed to gaining favor.
And I'm not comfortable with the word tribute. I mean, I'm not comfortable
differentiation like that because it's nuanced. You must agree that it's nuanced to understand the differentiation.
I think you got it. I think that's spot on. I'm just not comfortable with the word tribute. I would say a demonstration of my love toward God, and I don't expect anything in return from that because He's already given me everything. I have nothing else to gain. So when you do something for somebody where you have nothing else to gain, that is the only act that is truly selfless.
Right. But it could be taken away though. If you make wrong choices.
Are you talking about salvation?
Yeah. If you make wrong choices, it can be taken away, can't it?
It cannot. That is a belief.
So if you killed somebody tomorrow, that can't be taken away from you?
Okay, so are you familiar with the debate between Calvinism and Arminianism?
Absolutely not. Nope. But I'd love to hear about it.
Okay, so basic rundown. It's a huge division in the Christian church. Both are Christians, both can be saved, but one of us is wrong or we're both wrong. And the issue relies on what we call soteriology, or the study of salvation, how you're saved.
Okay.
And the contention is that one believes, the Calvinist, which I am, I believe that God is sovereign over salvation, that He is the one that chooses us from eternity past and will keep us till the end. So the fact that we're saved at all means that we're always saved. You know, it's like the once saved, always saved.
Right.
I'm not fond of that phrase, but I can use it today for that purpose. Arminians believe that you choose God freely out of free will, and you can also lose that salvation, like you said, if you do something bad.
Sure.
I don't believe that. I believe that, as the Bible says throughout the scriptures, but even in Philippians 1, it says that He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
In the Gospel of John, it says that any who come to me were drawn by the Father, and I will keep him for the day of salvation. So that means that God keeps us. He's the one who holds
God
our salvation.
Prevents you from doing any bad things that might...
No, because no, it's not. He doesn't prevent our actions. He prevents our salvation from being lost. So I object to your claim that you can lose your salvation. To answer your hypothetical, if we kill somebody, to answer that bluntly and hypothetically,
right,
and technically, yes, that is possible. That if you kill somebody, yes, potentially you can still be saved. However, that is an evidence that you're not saved. Like I was saying before, that if you claim to be a Christian and you're doing things that are not Christian, that's evidence that you're not really saved in the first place.
Okay.
There was,
but then you can get saved again after that. So you could have thought you were saved and led your life like you were saved. And then you do something that derails that. So that the fact that you even did something that could derail that, you can make an argument that meant you weren't saved to begin with, even though you thought you were. But then you can still get saved again after you did that derailing thing. You can go right back on the track.
No,
and
not
then
necessarily.
Be re-saved.
In the Arminian worldview, yes, that would be the case. But I'm a Calvinist, so I don't believe that. What I believe is that you are either
you from doing shitty things to stop you from being saved.
Honestly, like I still do bad things. Like other Christians still do bad things, and it's a result. Yeah, but the difference for Christianity is that is because we are, and we're getting into theology now, so bear with me.
Okay.
It's what Christians call sanctification. It's the battle with the old self and the new self. Okay. The new self is a renewed person in Christ that seeks only to do God's will.
Sure.
But we're still fleshy, and we still have the fall, and we still have sin. It's essentially like and this is a horrible analogy, but it was helpful for me at one time. It's like a pig. You're turning from a pig to a sheep. Pigs love rolling in the mud. They love just the warmth. They love the dirt. They love everything. But a sheep hates that. They love to be clean. They love to be, white. And essentially, we're sheep rolling in the mud, because although we're new, we have a new nature. We're still rolling in this filth, but it's not the same. It doesn't give us joy. It's something that we think is going to give us joy, but it doesn't. So every time,
clean, but we just keep getting drawn back to the mud.
Exactly. The mud looks appealing, and it looks awesome.
And we get out of the mud, and we're like, God damn it, we're covered in mud. I hate this.
I wouldn't use that phraseology.
And you're like, yay, mud.
I wouldn't use that phraseology, but yeah, there's actually a more perverse analogy in the book of Proverbs with a dog returning to its own vomit. You ever see No, I'm serious. Like you read the King James, didn't you? Like
it was about 7 years ago, but yeah.
It's a very poignant analogy. A dog vomits because he ate something that makes him sick, and all of a sudden he wants to go and eat it again. That's the human nature, is that we're Christian and we do things that are bad still. That is the war, that is the struggle, that is the spiritual warfare.
I get that, but that doesn't really explain the answer to my question though.
Maybe we went down a little bit of a rabbit trail.
Great, sure. Human nature is we're gonna do bad crap because humans do bad crap.
Sure.
It doesn't. It just still doesn't explain really the answer to my question. I don't think.
So I think we may have gone down a little bit of a rabbit trail. So could you refer your original question?
You seem really smart too, and I kind of want to. I feel like you're really this because I know Steve wants to talk about it, and I'm starting to feel bad for poor Steve because I kind of hijacked this because I wanted to talk to you.
Continue with this. This is great. I don't even want to go to the science. I'm enjoying.
You don't even want to go to the science.
And then we're gonna have two more.
Because I can do this episodes. All night.
No, we're gonna have Let's Talk About You with Floyd FP, theology with Eric, and then we're gonna have a Let's Talk About You science, Steve and Eric. So continue on.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I'm starting to feel bad because I know Steve wanted to talk to you about younger.
We're gonna make this guy famous. I'm telling you right here and now.
This is a good chat, though. I'm enjoying talking.
Cheers. Yeah.
Eric.
I appreciate it. I'm enjoying.
I can tell that you think through. You clearly thought this through. I mean, I'm not satisfied with the answers that you've given yourself, but I can see, especially coming from a presuppositional perspective, where you're assuming God, this would be a way to interpret and reconcile. I mean, I still don't understand the young Earth creationism part, but we don't have to talk about that because this is interesting. But I can.
We really can. If you really want to get into that, we can later.
Oh, I've had so many of those. We can if you want to, but that's.
I mean, you wanted to go into textual criticism, so that was.
Let me ask you, Eric,
yes.
How long do you have tonight? Because the live feed's going crazy.
Oh, are they? I never look at the chat.
They're all going crazy. Well, my live feed's crazy anyways. So, but
I haven't even looked.
I haven't looked either. I'm sorry. I try to pay attention to the people I'm talking to, so I don't generally.
Yeah, same here.
Look at the chat.
I have to pay attention to both. But I mean, how long do you have tonight, Eric? Because I mean, I don't mind starting after Shannon's done with her, obviously her discussion with you, starting an open hangout. I know Floyd FP wants to come in. PZ Myers may want to join. I still want to get to the science.
I'm really fine. I mean, I don't really have much. I'd like to get to bed before like midnight, which is, I'm an hour ahead of you, Steve. So I'm like 7:25 right now. But
oh, we got plenty of time then.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I want you guys to talk about this. I mean, I'm actually enjoying this. This is actually, you know, morality and Calvinism and things like that, which obviously I think Shannon will probably do a better job in having a conversation with that than I will. And then maybe we'll start a second one after this, and then we'll talk about those other things in more of an open format. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean,
you want to bring some Calvinists with you? I can get Matt Slick or you know, something like that.
It's really up to you. I'm good on my own.
That would be on your team for sure, Eric.
I don't want to be like one who had like 9 other people come in and they're all like, you know, bashing on the poor guy. I don't want to have that. But go ahead and continue on, and then Shannon, when you're ready, just let me know, and then maybe we'll start a second.
Sure. Yeah. I'm in Nova Scotia, so it's 10:30 here. So I've got another half an hour to 45 minutes in me tops before I'm asleep.
Then why don't we talk about what you want to talk about?
Okay, perfect. So your textual interpretation is something that like your different iterations of the Bible are something that I find interesting. That's another thing that I found difficult is like, if there's 12 versions, like if somebody, let's presuppose God, right?
Sure.
And let's presuppose Christianity. And somebody lays out 15 books in front of you and says, one of these is right. Go. Figure it out. One of them's right. You pick which one. What the hell?
And you're making this and you're making this analogous to the different versions of the Bible.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, exactly. Presuppose God, presuppose Christianity.
Sure.
Bible. Different.
Sure. I would say
which one's right. How do you decide? Why?
Sure. Okay, let me get to it. I would say that's a false dilemma. That's a false analogy too, because the Bible was written originally in Hebrew and Greek and a little bit of Aramaic. Right. So those were written such a long time ago, before the printing press in 1516, and everything prior to that was handwritten, copied. And not always were they professional scribes, especially with the New Testament. They were poor fishermen sometimes that had to pay for their own parchment paper. And so with all of that copying and pasting, some things made it in, some things got deleted. And the art and science of textual criticism is trying to go back to the original document. Now, the issue that we have in English is that we have multiple English translations of the same manuscript. Aside from the King James was translated from a text known as the Textus Receptus. Now, that text, I hope I don't bore you, but
no, I'm listening. Please go.
Okay, so the Textus Receptus, and I actually have a version of that in there, but I won't go get it.
Oh, you mean business, Eric? Okay.
Yeah, it had its origin with a man named Erasmus, Desiderius Erasmus. Okay. Now he was the one who first printed and published a Greek New Testament. He drew from only about a dozen Greek manuscripts that had been found in the manuscript tradition from 33 AD to 1516, right? He only drew from about a dozen. And what happened was that version went through 4 more revisions through 2 other people. And then when the King James, was being translated, they drew from those 5 editions originating with Erasmus and compiled it into one version of a Greek New Testament.
Right.
And the English translation was then back translated into Greek based on the textual decisions that they made, and that became the Textus Receptus. So that's vastly different than what we have today, where we have discovered 5,000 plus Greek New Testament manuscripts. Some are about that big, some are full books. Now, we have much more information now than we did back then, because they were either stored away in libraries, buried in the sands of Egypt, or what have you, some dating all the way back to the 2nd century. Now, we have a better understanding now through the science of textual criticism by comparing manuscripts with each other and being able to come up with a more pure translation, or a more pure Greek New Testament. So the New Testament that is typically translated in the modern versions, like the NIV, ESV, New Living Translation, New American Standard, those are translated from either the Nestle-Aland Greek New Testament, which is in its 28th edition currently, and the UBS text, which is in its 5th edition. And those texts are the updated versions, and they have more current textual information. The issue with now, mind you, all those English translations are pulling from the same Greek source. Sure. So when you lay out all these different books, you're not really laying out all these different books. You're laying out somebody's interpretation of one book. We have one book, which is a Greek.
I understand that the content is essentially this. I get that, because
not necessarily.
Differences. Okay.
It's the difference between dynamic and formal equivalent translations. And do you know another language?
Je parle un peu de français, mais.
Okay, so translate this in French. The early bird catches the worm. It doesn't really make sense. I can't say early,
oiseau. That's bird.
So,
yeah.
So it doesn't make sense in French, does it?
No, not really. Because no.
If you translate that literally, it doesn't make sense.
Have to use morning. Yeah. No. Sorry. No.
Now there's a French idiom.
So you're saying that metaphors don't really translate well between languages?
Well, not necessarily. Sometimes they do, and there's a French idiom
but
that
not
I'm aware
in every
of.
Instance. Because
if
you translate each individual word literally, then the metaphor can lose its ability to translate.
It's not only metaphors; it's common speak too. So Luke 9:22 is a perfect example. Okay. NIV says, "Listen very closely to what I'm about to tell you." Okay. The ESV or New American Standard, which are more formal, says, "Let these sayings sink into your ears." Now, the Greek words literally say, "Let these sayings sink into your ears," but we don't really know what that means, or some people might be confused by that. So the NIV or the New Living Translation take those Greek words, translate the meaning rather than the words. And so the reason you have all these different versions is because some translations, whether it be due to funding or due to publishing needs, decide to translate a version more formally or more dynamic. The NIV and the New Living Translation are more dynamic, so they translate meaning rather than the actual words. The ESV and NASB typically try to translate the words rather than the meaning and let the reader do the study themselves to see what it means.
So leave it open to their interpretation.
Somewhat, yeah. Not necessarily.
So that's all really interesting. Legitimately, that's interesting. But which version is there a version? Would probably be a better question that you ascribe to. If you could point to one that you say, this is the one that I feel like is the best translation based on what seems to be considerable knowledge about how the translations, the history of the translations and their legitimacy based on the original text.
Look, I'll be real frank with you and real honest. Okay. I hold a pretty high standard for Christians, and I hope that they would take their religion seriously enough to want to invest in it. And I would recommend that they actually learn the biblical languages. I myself am learning Koine Greek, and whenever I'm in church or in Bible study, I tend to try to read from those translations or the actual Greek text that the English versions pull from, because that's the only way you can really totally get back to the source. I'm not saying the English versions are bad or that they're not accurate. They are, but they do take a little bit of study, and they are a translation removed. If I were to recommend one, I would recommend the ESV, because it's mostly formal translation. It translates the words, but it doesn't translate them in such a way that it's wooden and it doesn't make sense and that it's hard to read.
Right.
The NASB, I believe, borders on wooden and a little hard to understand. So
Okay.
I think the ESV is a good middle ground between the NASB and the NIV. And the NIV is fine too for new Christians or Christians that English is not their previous language.
Right.
So for special situations like that, yes, I definitely recommend a more dynamic translation to get them started. However, with growth in your religion, you should move on to bigger and better things, I would say.
All right. Wow. All right. Well, that's more than I've ever had to listen to about
Ever had
translations of the
to?
Bible.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
well,
Yeah, no, that was poor wording. That's more than I ever have listened to, but
okay.
that's interesting. It's more than I've learned more about the translations of the Bible in this conversation than.
Well, hey, I got more videos on this if you want to check it out.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
That's better wording. That I've learned more in this conversation about translations of the Bible than I ever have. The previous wording was poor, so I apologize to that.
Hey, well, I appreciate that, Shannon. Thank you.
So, okay. Now, I'm impressed that you've done that much study on it, and good on you. If you're like, clearly you take it seriously, and I have a great deal of respect for the fact that you're invested in how serious you take it. And you seem so smart. So
it seems that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, here's why it seems is another bad word, but the reason that I'm saying it is because I keep drawing myself back to the young Earth creation thing.
It's
and
all
the
ruse.
only young Earth creationist I've really been exposed to it. Like you're learning other languages. You've put so much thought into it. You're forming very cogent, logical arguments.
Well, there
that,
are more out there. I mean, I'm really not that smart. Like I know it looks that way. It's really not.
No, I mean you're articulate. So how
can
you believe, like, when you're a young Earth creationist though? Like you're not an older.
So let me let you
like literal 6 days.
You want me to kind of expound on that then? Is that where
yeah,
you
I
want to go?
do. Just because now I'm getting to know you, I didn't want to go into
Okay.
it because
I think a
I
lot
thought
of
that
people do want you to kind of talk about this.
All right, so let's talk about it a little bit.
Steve says we got to. So
All right.
Live chat does want a little bit of the science.
Now I'm having dissonance reconciling that to you.
Sure. So and let me start with the criticism of Steve's video from yesterday.
Oh yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So
rip it. Go ahead.
I will say that the young Earth creationism thing came up, I would say, over 10 times in the video. And whole arguments were discounted because, oh, this argument, therefore young Earth creationism. And I will challenge anyone to watch that video and find the words young Earth creationism, because that's not what I was arguing. I was not arguing for a young Earth in that video. And I'm really not even sure how Steve came to that knowledge that I was a young Earth creationist. Where did you?
Let me ask on that. Do you start with the presupposition that the Earth is young, or is that a conclusion that you've arrived at?
It's a little bit of both, but I'm just curious where you found that information. I'm not sure I've really ever said that in my videos.
You have mentioned it in one of them, yeah.
Maybe in passing, but
yeah, I think it was a throwaway comment of some kind. But
okay, well, yeah. So here's my view on the whole young Earth creationism debate. Is that I believe, and let me start from a presupposition.
Oh,
I believe. Okay.
Oh,
so,
Eric.
All right. Well, let me start somewhere else. I believe that I could be wrong. So this is not a hill that I'm willing to die on. It's not something I believe is a problem for Christianity. And there are other views in Christianity that account for an old Earth with a young human species per se. So I could say that I could be wrong. This is not something that I'm 100% convinced on. Mm-hmm. However, I do believe from a presuppositional standpoint that it is the most natural reading of the Genesis account. Now, that being said, there are other evidences that I believe point to not necessarily a young Earth, but agreeing with the young Earth model.
Really?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yes. So and it's not necessarily evidences, but it's explanations of the evidences. So usually when arguments are given for an old Earth, or what most, as the guy at Essence of Thought said, the most scientifically literate among us believe, is that the Earth is about Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen those. I don't know if you've seen those videos. Those videos are really hard to watch. But
Which ones? Essence of Thought?
Essence, you know him?
Yeah.
Well, we had a little feud, so maybe you can go and watch
Did you?
those. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
yeah. Just go to his.
He's a very nice guy. He's very sweet.
I'm sure he is, just not to me. So.
Okay. Yeah, he's a sweet guy though.
Well,
Anyway.
I'm sure he is. He's a little robotic, a little bit of a reptile, but anyway.
No, that's not nice.
reptilian
Don't. Not
conspiracy.
nice. No, that's not nice.
I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
Not
Anyway.
nice. Not cool. I wouldn't let
Okay.
him talk about you like that.
Okay, well that's true. Maybe
Talk
maybe
about him like that.
I'll take that back.
Thank you.
And okay, so back to the issue is that most people today believe that the universe itself is what, around like 16 billion years old.
13.8 billion, give or take.
13, 16, some billions of years.
There's a few billion years difference there, but okay.
Yeah.
Sure, let's go.
And so
what's a few
evidence
billion
is
years on, friends?
I mean, it's the difference between billions and thousands, right?
Right.
So the evidences they give for that are things like let's say for the Earth, the geological spectrum or the radiometric datings and things of that nature. And for the universe, they have like the fact that we can see light from stars that have burned out, billions of years ago, and we see those today. All of those different things, and all of those evidences make sense, but given the Christian model, they can also make sense as well. Because one thing is that if God is real, if we presuppose God, then the natural laws are suspended because he can work outside of them. Now, this is going to sound like a cop-out, and I understand that, which is why I'm not super
you're not married to this idea, but I'm not married.
I'm willing to flex a little bit if I can be convinced, but honestly, it still makes sense to me, is that let's take, for example, when God created Adam and Eve, right? And you've read the Bible yourself. Mm-hmm. Did he create them as a fetus or a baby?
I don't think he created them. He created them, but when he did create them, he created them as full-grown ass people.
Well, Eric, the problem you're running into is you're running to what's called either the Omphalos hypothesis or last Thursdayism or last Wednesdayism, which is an unfalsifiable hypothesis that God created the universe with the appearance of age.
That's exactly what I'm appealing to. So let me address that for a second.
Eric's like, you got it, Steve.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So this is where I'm going, because if you were to travel back to that year or that time when God created Adam and Eve, you would see evidences for two things. You would see evidences for an old Adam and a young Adam. You would see this is a full-grown man. He has, facial hair. He's, he looks like he's aged a bit. That is a 20 to 30-year-old man.
Okay, here's your problem though. If you were coming there at that time, you would have never seen a baby to know what a baby looked like. We know what a baby looks like now. At that point in time, a baby had never existed if you presuppose God.
Shannon,
baby wasn't even a concept that existed yet.
Let me continue the argument, Shannon, please.
All right.
All right. So let me rephrase. If we today were to travel back in time and try to discern what age Adam was, having seen a baby, having seen all that, we would see two types of evidences. We would see he's full grown. He's got a full head of hair.
Sure.
He's a man. He's 20 to 30 years old. But there's also evidences that would counteract that. We would look at the bottom of his feet and say, wow, that's as smooth as the rest of him. He doesn't have calluses. He doesn't have signs of aging in certain areas. Like, there's evidences that cannot be explained with an old Adam theory. In the same way, the universe is created in such a way to sustain life and has the appearance of age, but was actually created in a mature state.
But Eric,
now,
the universe was created 5 minutes ago.
Yes, I understand that, and I agree that that is a fallacy, which is why, I'm not married to this issue. But if you presuppose God and you presuppose the Christian religion, then that makes sense.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, Eric, because when the whole point of creation science, which is the narrative that young Earth creationists promote, is that it's not the Omphalos hypothesis. It is they're saying actual evidence in the scientific genres, that biology,
Right.
geology, physics, cosmology, cosmogony, you name it. They're saying
Sure.
all those different branches, there's evidence to point to a young Earth. They're not saying that it's just the appearance of age. They're saying
Yeah.
that there's actual evidence. Do you subscribe that there's actual scientific evidence that indicates a young Earth
Yeah.
or an older, or a younger universe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is some evidence. There is some evidence to support that a little bit. And I'm not going to subscribe to every young Earth creationist out there, because I know it's kind of a wacky sector of Christianity, and I don't agree with every young Earth creationist in everything they say. I believe from a presuppositional standpoint that it is the most natural way of reading Genesis 1, which is why I presuppose Christianity. But however, I do believe there is some evidence that cannot be explained, and there is some evidence that can be explained for why we believe the Earth is old. Take the geological spectrum, for example. You say that all those layers are to represent thousands and thousands of time periods throughout history, or it could have been a huge catastrophic event. What?
I said, don't say flood.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry. I know your opinion to me is going from here to here, and I understand that, but
we're losing hope for you, man.
That is
you seeking help. No, go ahead.
You know what? But I'm okay with that, because I do presuppose that those things are true, and if the worldwide flood did happen, then I think that would explain a lot of things, because we've never had quite. We've never had a worldwide flood. We've never had that.
We've never had a worldwide flood. We all agree on that.
So we don't truly understand how that happened. We don't truly understand everything that was involved in that event. It was huge and catastrophic.
It was imaginary.
Well, you presuppose that, Shannon, that it was imaginary.
Nope.
Oh,
no, there's no evidence that it happened.
Yeah, I personally, I don't presuppose the age of the Earth. The age of the Earth is what I look at, the evidence, and I conclude that the evidence is correct. When I look at the radiometric dating, when I look at the the geology of the strata, I can say, you know what? Yeah, I see evidence that the Earth is old. I've been doing this a very long time. I have yet to see a young Earth creationist argument or young Earth creationist scientific claim that holds any water. Not one. I mean, they're always going back to either what you said, God done did it, which is the appearance of age or something, or it's just a matter of interpretation and faith. But I have yet to have actually one young Earth creationist say, hey, look, here's some scientific evidence that actually does indicate a young Earth. What have you specifically seen that doesn't negate an old Earth? In other words, I don't want negative evidence against an old Earth or negative evidence against evolution. I want something that's positive evidence for a young Earth. What would you think the best example of that would be?
Well, that is a very good question, Steve.
I know, ask the questions.
Yeah.
And he's modest. That's his best quality.
Shannon's not the only one that can ask good questions.
Sure. So let me be perfectly honest here, and that I will say that was not a huge issue for me in my early Christianity. It was something that I studied briefly. I do remember some evidences that I would be able to sort of quote to you, but I haven't really studied them in a few years, and so I would feel more comfortable if we arranged another debate or another time to talk where I research a little bit more, so I can have a little more confidence.
Oh, we're bringing you back every week, dude.
Yeah.
The Eric show now.
So,
Shannon.
But let me. Sure, but that's not a cop out, because I am saying from the outset, I am presupposing this, because it is what I believe to be the most natural reading of Genesis, and so I could be wrong. There could be other old Earth models that Christianity holds to that maybe I'll have to adopt in the future. But based on the evidence that I remember studying in the past, and honestly, how I presuppose the reading of Genesis, that's the conclusion that I come to today.
I would be totally down for that. Matter of fact, Shannon, would you moderate something like that between him and I?
I absolutely would. And I have a couple things to say to Eric when you guys feel like you're finished sussing this out. I don't want to interrupt.
If he's not like on the spot prepared.
I'm not on the spot prepared.
Fine with that. I don't ever want to put something on the spot. I don't want to sharpshoot him or anything like that. If he wants to like take some time to get his ducks in a row and bring him, I'm fine with that. Because I mean, I've heard just about every young Earth argument there is, right? So I mean, I'm down to see what he would like to bring. Surprised me. No spoilers. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah. Okay. So Eric, I have a couple questions for you after listening to that exchange.
Sure.
So, like I said, you're articulate. So I'm presupposing that you're also an intelligent guy based on this conversation.
You'd be wrong.
No, presuppositions are crap. You're right. I should. But anyway, so I feel like you must really want to reconcile with the Bible, and maybe you're giving some intellectual concessions so that you can reconcile this, so because it makes sense to you and you gain something from it.
Yeah, that's a fair question, honestly, because okay, so
like if you come across something that gives you the dissonance, you're like, okay, well, God can do that, so that reconciles it. No more dissonance.
No. I mean, Christianity has never been about, and I know some atheists in the audience may laugh at this, but it's never been about just surrendering the intellect and just saying, let's not think about this and kind of shut our ears to everything. There are definitely doubts that I have, and there are doubts that many Christians have, because there are things that we just cannot explain, and sometimes just studying the things are too hard to think about. Right. Like one of the issues that was brought up in Steve's video was my misunderstanding of quantum quantum mechanics. Yeah. Quantum mechanics,
vacuum space.
Yeah. Like Krauss's view of nothing. Like, I really don't fully understand it, but I do still have. I mean, we could talk about that another day, but I still have issues with that. But yeah, of course, there are issues that atheists bring up all the time that sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe I need to do a little more research, or maybe I need to kind of look into that further. However, there are still many different areas of, I would say, interest when in regards to Christianity, whether it's not true, whether theism is not true, that I'm already fully convinced on enough that when I see these doubts, when I see these kind of things that I still need to figure out, I'm okay, because I've already figured out enough that I believe Christianity is true. I suppose the scale is tipped.
So you feel like your scale is tipped, and if there's still a couple things on this side of the scale, then meh?
I suppose.
It doesn't need to be 100% for you, and this is convincing enough that the fact that this stuff doesn't make a lot of sense when you try to reconcile it with your logical ability to assess the natural world and your understanding that, I mean, I'm assuming that you have respect and reverence for science and scientific method.
Of course, of course I do. What I have disrespect for is the kind of cultism and the kind of I don't know what you call it, what's that thing? The clickism in science in America today. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in America, if you question anything that's mainline scientific, you're ostracized. And there was I heard a story once of a Chinese scientist who came to America and gave a lecture and was questioning Darwinism because of the Cambrian explosion. He went into a bunch of different things and was like, Cambrian explosion, the explosion is like kind of a huge issue for Darwinism. And somebody in the audience asked him, like, do you feel comfortable giving this lecture when you come from a communist country? And
that's not relevant.
Well, even still, like, it seemed relevant to the audience. And he, being no one's fool, he said, it's kind of funny because in China, you can question Darwinism, but you can't question the government. In America, you can question the government, but you can't question Darwinism.
Real quick, Eric, can you give us your definition of how you're using that word Darwinism? Because I can tell you right now,
Darwinism?
I don't use it. I'm not a Darwinist. I don't know of any Darwinists.
Right. Yeah.
It is an antiquated term that's very, very old. It would used to be a term that described Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, which, as we know, is not correct. There are other things involved in that. I mean, not like he was like totally messed up. It's just that he didn't have the knowledge. He didn't know about genetics. Didn't take into account things like Mendelian inheritance or anything like that. Right. So evolution right now is the modern evolutionary synthesis combined with descent with modification. That's not the same thing as Darwinism. However, some people do conflate those two. Some people do call themselves Darwinists when they're talking about the theory of evolution, or as a pejorative. So can you real quickly just tell us how you're using that word so we know how you're using it?
Sure, yeah, and that's news to me, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. But when I use that word, I think of modification of the species by natural selection, and I do take into account those genetics and all those things you brought up. So I don't know, maybe I did conflate the two terms, but modern day
So you think evolution?
Evolution in its broadest sense, definitely.
Do you think you maybe use the word Darwinism because in the circles that talk about that, they conflate evolution with Darwin?
Well, those are my words.
Because they want to discredit it, and they point specifically to Darwin, whose theories, although they sparked the science that now studies evolution through time, was
I understand your criticism.
So they try to conflate it so that they can discredit it by pointing to him as the sole. Like they equate him with the entire field that has come after him.
Yes,
and don't
Shannon, I understand
everything that happened since.
Yes, I understand, and it's.
But don't do that anymore.
And it's sure. Well, I'm not doing it. Those were the Chinese scientists' words, not mine. I don't use that terminology. Natural selection.
So it was just in the story.
Right, just in the story. But yeah, I mean, I understand the criticism too. Because oftentimes people will bring up, like quotes in the Origin of the Species, like the irreducible complexity thing, and like they won't take into account like all the things that came in afterward. So yeah, I get the criticism, and we shouldn't be criticizing Darwin. We should be criticizing what is current science today. So I get it.
Sure, and criticize away.
That was
criticism. That's how we learn things.
Sure, yeah, and I agree with that. But that's the scientist's words, and I believe he meant the same thing. Maybe he just didn't have the terminology that we did. But the overall moral of the story is that we have a huge problem in America with what's it called, academic freedom, because and I'm sure you've all in the audience, and probably you too, Steve, have heard of the documentary. Expelled that Ben Stein did.
Don't know.
Well, wait, hold on.
Like you anymore.
Hold on. Okay, so are you telling me that is not legitimate? That if anybody criticizes evolution at all, that grants are taken from them, that in some cases they're fired?
I can tell you right now that movie was the most reprehensible piece of trash. Incorrect.
Well, look here.
Wait, hang on. It was rated like 9 Rotten Tomatoes on Rotten Tomatoes. It was known for being false.
That's an entertainment rating system.
Eric, people's grants aren't being taken away from them because they are just for this. There's no university that is invested in a paid tenured professor that is going to take that professor's grant away, that has been invested in that research, just because they criticize the theory of evolution.
Never.
They want.
How do you explain those? How do you explain those cases?
Theories. No, let me finish for a second, because I came from academia. My best friend is a PhD biologist. I studied in a field that, I mean, it's a social sciences, but I lived in academia for 14, 15 years. In a couple different universities. They want you to criticize other people's science. They want you to.
Exactly.
They want you to.
It's part of the process.
They're betting on you like a horse that you're going to be the one that disproves the really widely held theory. They want you to. They want you to. If you are the scientist that disproves evolution, you just made them a mint.
It doesn't even have to be the whole theory, just a portion of it.
Scientifically disprove evolution.
I think that's big. I think that's big talk. Honestly, I thought that's
Eric.
That's big talk.
Look who do you think would make the most amount of money? People promoting a theory that everybody already accepts, right? I mean, almost 99% of all the scientists accept that. which would make more money? Somebody who actually can demonstrate that it's wrong, or somebody that just goes with the status quo? If somebody could demonstrate that it's wrong, I guarantee it wouldn't be just the academics giving him money. It would be the Discovery Institute. It'd be AIG, ICR, Ken Ham. It would be all these people funding him like you've never seen before. The guy would be the most famous person on the planet.
They want you to criticize things. They do. They do not want you to make shit research so that you can propagate an agenda. They don't want you to do that, because if you make crappy research, it can be picked to pieces by other universities, and it's highly competitive.
Yeah.
Highly competitive.
Sure.
If you put out a paper that can be torn to pieces, you make them look bad. They don't want to look bad. So if you are making unfounded, ridiculous criticisms of scientific papers that have been reproduced and reproduced and reproduced and held up to peer review and held up to peer review and held up to peer review, just because you have a specific ideology, they probably don't like that. But if you can really credibly do research that shows the holes in somebody else's research, they're all about it. They're all about it. And I can promise you that. I don't know what university Ben Stein went to where they didn't want you to criticize other people's research.
Well, he talked to other PhD scientists in that video. So it's not just Ben Stein. It's not just Ben Stein. But what I'm saying is this may be true.
I'm referring to him because that's what you brought up. And I'm telling you,
this may be, sure. But what I'm saying is that this may be true in the broadest sense of academia, where in these other kind of like auxiliary fields of science where they see all sorts of different theories, maybe that's true, but evolution has become a main staple. It has become something that nobody can truly criticize.
Well, I have to disagree with that. I mean, Eric,
who criticizes gravity?
Of course, I know.
Scientists
I know
are
you
vicious with
believe
each
that.
other. I mean, have you read Ferengula? Have you read P.Z. Meyer's blog? I mean, he's a scientist, and he's very happy to go after other scientists. I'm quite sure if he feels that they're wrong. There is a viciousness that does go on in the scientific community with some kind of respect, obviously. But when they think of scientists, especially what you would consider the young Earth creationist blog posters, the Tompkins, Dr. Tompkins of the world, the Dr. Humphreys, the Snellings, the Austins, they are all PhDs, but I don't consider them scientists. Most scientists are more than happy to go rip them.
Why though?
Because they don't publish peer-reviewed research, and when you look at their methodology, which I have, it's garbage. They quote mine. They don't show their data sets. They don't control for variables appropriately. They don't properly list and lay out the methodology that they're using to do their research. They don't submit it for peer review to people other than the people that are employed by the same person that's paying them to do the research, which isn't the way the peer review process works. I know people think it's polluted, but I dare you to try to submit something for peer review and then tell me it's easy. That's why. Read the research. Study research methodology. Take research methodology and study it, and then read that research and tell me that it's not filled with holes, and that's why they don't submit it, and that's why they open up their own journals, because that's the only place they can publish that crap.
And if I can add real quick, if I can add real quick, and I've dealt with a lot of them. I have correspondence with all of them.
Your guys'
hang on, 1 sec. I have correspondence with
your guys' internet was cutting out a little bit.
Am I cutting out? Am I good?
No. Shannon's was a little bit. So I heard most of it, but some of it I didn't. So
Danny, might have to
it was mostly just me yelling crap.
Yeah. So let's maybe try to keep that a little shorter. But I'm trying to let you talk, but let's keep it a little shorter. But let me
on my end. Well, real quick, those people that we're talking about, those people that write for those
sure.
web pages and stuff like that. One thing that is ubiquitous among all of them is that they all start with a presupposition, which in science you really cannot do. That they start with a presupposition that.
Well, hold on.
Let me finish.
Wait, because
hang on. Let me tell you what the presupposition is.
Sure.
The presupposition that they can't be wrong. They start with the presupposition that the young Earth narrative must be correct, and that no amount of science can change that. That is from their own webpage. That is in their mission statement, or what they call the articles of faith that they call them. They all have.
Who are you talking about right now?
ICR, AIG, every one of these
Oh,
sites that write for these web pages have to
Okay.
start with the position that younger creationists cannot be wrong. That is not how science is done. Period.
No, you
Sure,
null and
but
alternative
the
hypothesis.
issue I
You're
have
trying
with
to
that
disprove
is
the
that
null.
the issue that I have with that is that you in your own video, I believe it was you, I don't remember exactly who said this. I'm pretty sure it was you, Steve. You said in your own video that science begins with looking for a naturalistic explanation for something. And if there is a God, if there is some sort of supernatural being out there that has created the universe and everything we see today, then science itself has a presupposition like on par with what those people have. So if you start with that presupposition too, of course you're never going to come to a supernatural claim. You're never going to come to a supernatural result.
Well, let me address that. That's a different thing. What science does is science adheres to what's called.
How is it different?
I'll explain it.
How is it different if we both have presuppositions? Is not yours a special pleading just like ours?
No, because science itself, the point of having science, the reason science exists is to follow methodological naturalism.
Not necessarily true. That's not how we got started.
I'm telling you, trust me, that is what science is for. That's what science does. That's what the tool of science is, to find naturalistic observational evidence of things that, find a natural explanation to our observations and to make predictive modeling. That's exactly what it's for. Now, if you want to take that out of the realm of science and try to find supernatural causations, then that goes more in the realm of philosophy, I would think, or metaphysics even, but it doesn't have to do with science. Science is a very specific tool. And it's by its very nature, it's only supposed to find naturalistic causations. Period.
Well, look here. Well, look here. Like, and try to listen to what I'm saying, because I'm not saying what I think you're thinking that I'm gonna say.
Guys, before I'm going to interrupt just for a second. That's only because I'm going to drop off because I have to work in the morning. But I feel like you guys are going to have a really good conversation, and I don't want to interrupt it. So thank you, Eric. I want to say thank you before you keep going. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thank you, Steve, for setting it up so that Eric and I could have the opportunity to talk.
No problem. And thank you.
Please
want to continue. You want to start another one? I don't really mind either way.
No, keep going because I'm going to listen to it as I'm going to bed. So please don't stop talking because I want to keep listening.
Okay. All right.
Live chat. I might interact with you guys in a minute.
So let me say goodbye to you, Shannon. It was a pleasure meeting you and a pleasure talking with you. I think you had awesome questions and awesome objections and things that made me think a little bit. So I really appreciate our talk. So thank you for what you do.
You as well. Find me I'm Shannon _Q0 on Twitter. I don't know if you have Twitter. If you do, find me and we can chat more. Okay.
Shannon _Q0, something like that. Okay.
All right.
I'm Eric from THiNKeasy everywhere. So.
Okay. I'll find THiNKeasy. I'll find Eric from THiNKeasy. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Shannon.
Be nice to me. Be nice while I'm gone. Okay. You be
nice. I'm always
nice. Bye. He's nice. I'm just kidding.
Take care, Shannon.
Bye, Eric.
We're gonna get him up to like 300 subs because I told people that to go sub to his channel. But okay, so real quick, let me ask the live chat. Do you guys just want to continue with this? And I'll let one or two people in. PZ said he didn't want to come in, but
I'll tell you what. Let me take a quick restroom break, and then maybe we can solve that issue.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll sing in the interim.
All right, I'll be right back.
Keep people entertained. Okay, well, I guess I'm on the spot here. Let you guys know real quick. Let's see what kind of upcoming events. Not really. Yeah, I really got nothing right now. I'm really kind of like wanting to explain to Eric the whole point of science and why we don't have supernatural causations for natural events. But I think personally, if we did find a supernatural causation, it would somehow incorporate itself into our naturalistic way of thinking. I think the differentiation between supernaturalism and naturalism is pretty arbitrary. And I usually let people describe for themselves what they mean by supernatural as opposed to natural. And that's what I'm going to be asking Eric when he gets back here, because I don't really know of a really good definition for supernatural. But by the way, Neocon Mintz in the live chat, he was one of the ones that we're going to be talking with next week, I guess. We were trying to do today, but Shannon wanted to do this. But we are going to have a discussion with Neocon Mint, Dr. Herman Mays, maybe Stephen Hoyt from The Place. and a few other people on whether on DNA, if it's a code or not, and not so much the implications of what it would mean if DNA is a code. We're not. No, I think nobody's coming from the perspective that there's a requirement of that it requires an intelligence, but the philosophy of what it means in information theory, if DNA is a code or not. Now, I take the position that Dr. Mays takes. I don't see DNA being a code. I think it's just an analogy. So if you want to argue with that next week with Neocon Mint, myself, and a few other people, let me know. I'll make a post in the Great Debate community about it. Whatever your position you take, whether DNA is a literal code or whether it's just an allegory or just a figure of speech that people use to help promote a concept. I do take the figure of speech and the concept, but just real quick, one in the live chat. I know this doesn't get on the video because I'm not recording the live chat. What do you guys think? Just as a straw poll, what if DNA is a code or not? And I mean literally a code as an sender receiver or information theory, or just an analogy. I'm just trying to get a general consensus of what people think. Most biologists I know think it's more of an analogy, but there are some papers I've read where they argue that it actually is a literal code. But we're going to be doing that next week, I think. Okay, so Eric's back.
Still there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Do you want to open this up a little bit of like one or two people come in? I don't want to keep it like too much.
What do you mean?
I can bring in a person, like one or two people, kind of open it up a little bit if anybody
Yeah,
wants.
that's fine. That's fine.
I was asking people about if DNA is a code, because that's a big thing on my Facebook right now. People are arguing like vehemently against or vehemently for that DNA is a code or not. It's like turned into a huge ordeal. So I asked but anyway, so let's go back to the topic. And if people want to come in, message me. I'll let one or two people in. I will give you the link. I don't want to like get too many people in here, but the reason, let me give you an example of why we don't have supernatural causations for science. Supernatural causation, right? And if we're looking for a reason why lightning exists, we can posit anything, right? We could say, oh, well, Thor did it, or we can posit, fairies did it. Supernatural doesn't tell us anything. And so the point of science was to say, we want to find if there's an actual explanation for this that doesn't involve something of the supernatural persuasion. Now, I will let you describe what you mean by supernatural, because again, I don't think there's an actual distinction between the two besides some arbitrary line of demarcation that basically is supernatural is what we don't know yet. I'm fine with that. I do posit that God would be supernatural, but if God manifested himself, one can make an argument that it's now become in the natural universe, right? Now part of natural. So what do you mean by the difference between naturalism and non-naturalism?
Non-natural and supernatural means, well, essentially supernatural means it's beyond the natural. It goes beyond a naturalistic explanation. And so I do take objection to your analogy that if we're looking for a cause for lightning, then maybe Thor must have done it. I would say, and I'm pretty sure you've heard this before, that science initially did get started as a result of theists trying to understand the creation better and how it's the way that God created things and he orchestrates things in the universe. They want to figure out how it works. And so even though lightning and rain and all these different things have somewhat naturalistic explanations and we can figure out even more how they work and how God uses them, God is still ultimately in control of all of it, even though it's not necessarily measurable. An nationalist argument, but it makes sense to me. Because if God is real, then he does orchestrate all those things, and there are ways that we can figure out how those things work and be able to take them apart like science does.
There's quite a few problems with that, though. Okay, one of the major problems with that kind of approach is that it doesn't explain anything. There's no mechanism by which we can say, okay, I want to posit a supernatural causation for lightning. Okay, well, how did it happen? How did Thor do it? How did God do it? There's no mechanism by which we can say, even if you
well, yeah, of course there is. Yeah, of course there is. I mean that's a non-issue.
What was the mechanism he used to create the universe?
Well, you were talking about lightning just now, so let's talk about lightning. Okay. It's the same way.
Natural or not natural?
It's the same way that the naturalists explains it. The explanations are the same. The only difference is that the Christian says that God is so sovereign over the universe that he orchestrated it in such a way that it strikes wherever he decides it to, but he still uses the natural means to do that. The creation of the universe is a vastly different question.
Okay, well, okay, let's stick with lightning. First of all, the theists that you're talking about, scientists back then, a lot of them were theists. This is true, but a lot of them back then, the church and the educational systems were one and the same. They were really, if you want to be educated, you really had to go to a school that was run by clergy or run by theists most of the time. That's where the education lied. However, you're right. They did want to find explanations, but none of them ever said, okay, I observed this. The explanation must be God. They didn't take their theism and apply it to their approach to science. They wanted to know what causes lightning. Okay, well, it's electricity, right? We have a differential in potential between the ground and the clouds. We can show why lightning occurs. We understand the mechanism by which there's a potential difference and there's an electric discharge. There's nothing in there that says the explanation was God, because God explains everything, right? If I posit God,
yeah, it does. I mean, that's
nothing.
why. Right. I mean, that's kind of like why it's a non-issue. That's why it's a non-issue for a lot of theists, because especially for me, like a Calvinist, I believe that God is sovereign over all things. So even to the most minute things, like where lightning strikes or where rain falls, that was all predetermined in the eternal past. And so there are naturalistic explanations for those things, but still I believe God is in control of everything. Okay, and so yeah, it's unverifiable and it's unfalsifiable, and I get that, but I am presupposing God here.
You're positing, okay, you're positing some kind of end of an infinite regress. You're saying, okay, at some point God is the explanation of everything. I get your position on that.
Sure.
But when we're looking at a phenomenon, right, a specific phenomenon like lightning, we don't posit God did it. We posit a naturalistic explanation for it. That's what science does.
Yeah, a theist would do the same thing.
Well, you just said that you think that science should have supernatural explanations for things.
For some things, not all things. I mean, like the creation of the universe or abiogenesis, things like that.
So if we can describe abiogenesis using chemicals and natural processes at some point, which I believe in the next couple of decades we're going to be there, does that eliminate the need for God, or is that just the problem I'm running into is that when you posit God for something, it explains nothing. Because something that explains everything explains nothing. And so, and I hate using other people's quotes because I'm not a big fan of quote mining, but Neil deGrasse Tyson basically, he had a brilliant comment. Basically, if that's how you want to approach this or how you want to play it, then God is an ever receding pocket of ignorance. Right. And I think he's spot on about that. And I'm not atheist. I'm agnostic. And we can get to the epistemics of that later, but I mean,
that's fine. I mean,
God doesn't exist point of view, right?
Sure.
Okay, so if you want to posit God as the initial conditions for everything, the prime mover, whatever, that's a different approach that I'm not even really going to get into. I'll accept that you believe that, no problem. But if I want to see something about how we observe the universe or how we observe the earth, or in this case, young earth creationism versus something like old earth creationist or theistic evolution, I'm not going to posit that there's a deity behind all this. I'm going to go, okay, what is the science behind it? And then look at the science and then formulate a conclusion.
And I think that's where your presuppositions fall, because you're presupposing a naturalistic explanation, just like we're presupposing a supernatural. And that's where the standstill is. That's where I think this argument will never be solved, is because we both have presuppositions. And obviously there are gaps in science that a naturalistic explanation has not solved yet, and that may be God of the gaps, but they're pretty difficult issues that cannot be solved. I mean, I know we can go through like Lawrence Krauss's theory of, or mathematical equation, like you said, of how a universe can come from nothing, but still that is not fully proven to the degree that most atheists or naturalists believe evolution has.
Proven it is possible.
Sure, it's proven maybe possible, and still I don't understand it. But when we go into something, when we start going into historical science, where we start trying to figure out how things happened a really long time ago and that are phenomena that were never repeated, that's where the theist or the supernaturalist will probably start to posit supernatural explanations. And other than that, naturalistic explanations are fine.
So when you make the determination there is no naturalistic explanation. Like, for example, the creation of the universe, right? Whether it be
Sure.
something along the lines
Oh,
of M theory, or if there was a reverse entropic universe prior to ours, where do you say, you know what, we have no explanation for this, we'll never find it? By the way, I don't necessarily even subscribe to like the principle sufficient reason, but when do you say, oh, you know what, the only explanation is God? When do you make that determination?
well, that's a good question. I think it's a fair question. And honestly, like I said in my videos, in my previous videos, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a cosmologist or any of those things. And so I can't things to the degree that those PhD level scientists can. But what I do see is a debate, and I do see that some PhD scientists with the same credentials don't subscribe to those things, and that there is debate. And the fact that there is a huge debate, even though you and maybe even Shannon or anybody else might take issue with that research and that science, I still don't see that. I see a debate and I see a conversation, and sometimes both sides make sense to me. And that's where I posit, you know what, maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe naturalism isn't explaining it all. Maybe supernaturalism has some questions to answer. But the thing about the creation of the universe and the first life coming from non-life, those are two things that if those were explained sufficiently and were able to be repeated or observed in any way, I would have some serious issues.
Well, I mean, okay, at least you agree that there's some kind of falsification for your beliefs. And
Sure.
and here's the thing. You can accept that, like I said, that God created everything as the initial prime mover. Okay, that's going to be a different argument altogether, or a different conversation. But as somebody who's a young Earth creationist, the problem I see is that when a young Earth creationist starts with the presupposition that the Earth is young, then they ignore all scientific evidence to the contrary, because that's what they do for a presupposition. You're right. We all have presuppositions, but the presuppositions I have are validatable. They're justifiable. I can tell you my epistemic framework, why I have every presupposition I have. For example, I presuppose that the universe exists. I take it axiomatically. I take it as a properly basic belief. It's part of my foundationalism approach. Not everybody has to do it that way. There's many different ways you can build a framework, right? But I think this works for me. It's simple. It's easy. So I think that everybody has to kind of presuppose that there's a universe. If not, you cannot function. You cannot get up in the morning and put your feet on the floor if you don't presuppose that the Earth is going to still be there, right? Those are just simple presuppositions we all take to account every single day of our lives to function in society. I don't think it's something that everybody has to take into account as a presupposition that God exists or that the Earth is young. And when you do that, then you're saying, okay, I presuppose the Earth is young. Let me look at this evidence here. And all the evidence points against that. I can tell you right now, we'll have multiple conversations on this, but I have yet to see a single solitary shred of scientific evidence that indicates a young Earth. Just nothing. Every one of them, I can show you why it doesn't indicate what you think it does.
Okay. And I'll just say for any presuppositionalists in the audience that they are probably going to say something to the effect, and I probably wouldn't want to spend too much time on this, but the fact that you presuppose those things, that there is a universe that is going to be here tomorrow, that when you wake up out of bed, that you're going to plant your feet on the ground, that everything in the future is going to be like it is in the past. There's no reason to presuppose that on a naturalistic worldview, because God is the foundation of those constants.
Why can't I presuppose the uniformity of nature?
But again, like I won't go into that.
Do you wake up every day going, the uniformity of nature might change and the sun may not rise?
Well, I don't, because I believe in a God that sustains the universe, that has created everything to such a degree that it will be that way for a long time.
Why would I possibly need to ground that? I could just say from my experience that I am justified that the universe of nature is going to be the same as it is tomorrow.
Right. And what I'm saying is that those presuppositions that you make are unfounded. That's all that I'm saying. But your question that you were raising was that if I believe that the Earth is young, which I do, but again, like I said, I'm not married to that.
Okay.
And why I see evidence that everything seems to go against that, right? That was your question?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the evidence, when you look at radiometric dating, when you look at the actual data,
radiometric dating.
Yeah, I actually happen to like radiometric dating, but if you look at the actual data, can you think off the top of your head is something that says, oh, well, when I look at this, it's actually indicating or indicative of a young Earth.
Well, let's talk about radiometric dating for a second, because like I said, I'm not a scientist, so please take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but I know verified cases where radiometric dating didn't work, where it dated things incorrectly, because when you do those systems, you make assumptions and you make sometimes wrong results.
So let me run this past you. We know of instances where radiometric dating doesn't work. We don't use radiometric dating for those types of things. For example, you cannot radiometrically date aquatic animals.
Of course, you radiometric date rocks, don't you?
We radiometrically date a lot of things. Depends on the type you use, whether carbon dating,
sure, or like potassium argon dating, something like that.
But for example, like carbon dating, we don't carbon date aquatic animals because of the reservoir effect. So if we try to date like a freshly killed seal that has eaten a bunch of oysters or something, then it's going to be incorrect. But the presuppositions.
Okay, so let me stop you there, just because I want to learn a little bit. I wasn't aware of the not carbon dating aquatic life. So maybe you can send me a resource for that, so that just for my own research, I can
it's called reservoir effect. It's due to the fact that we only can date things that get their carbon sources from the atmosphere. And what happens is carbon actually builds up because of the calcium carbonate from aquatic animals, and so it's going to have a different concentration. And what we're doing is we're looking for a ratio of carbon 14 to carbon 12, and we know that ratio from atmospheric sources, but in the ocean it could be all kinds of things. So we can't get an actual read of how long ago something died if it gets its carbon from a non-atmospheric source. It's a very well-known phenomenon called the reservoir effect, which young Earth creationists like not to tell people, not you.
But well, like I said, I didn't even know about it, so I appreciate you telling me about it, so I can do some research later.
And the other thing was that when it comes to radiometric dating, we do take certain presuppositions, but again, there's reasons for it. Like one of the things that we presuppose is that radiometric decay rates don't change. Okay, and now I can give you examples of some very isolated conditions where radiometric decay rates can change. Okay, but they're really technical. They're not really important. But we want to talk about K capture or some types of beryllium can actually change depending on the state of the atom. But for the most part, radiometric decay rates are constant. And so when you have a young Earth creationist says, "Oh, well, that's an assumption," yes, it is. Now demonstrate that assumption is wrong. I have yet to have Dr. Humphreys, I have yet to have any of them, when they tell me that there's accelerated decay or that decay rates have changed, give me any evidence that they have. It's just they're asserting it that they had. Because of the presupposition.
Like I said, I'm not as well versed as I used to be, but there is one that I remember in the far banks of my mind that had to deal with, I believe it was potassium argon dating. Would you have issues with that dating?
Potassium argon dating argon can only be used certain times. You can't use it for like lava flows, because there's something called inclusions, which are basically parts of rocks and other things that are picked up during the lava flow. So it can only tell the last time these eruptions occurred, only the last time there's a solidification of the rock. And so we understand that the rock we date is not going to be measured billions of years old, because it's not billions of years since it's erupted.
Would that be the same if a newly developed lava flow was dated to be billions of years?
It would have all kinds of weird effects, because lava flows, again, pick up all those inclusions, and you're going to get a weird ratio of either argon 40 to argon 39 or potassium 39 to argon 40.
Because what I just heard was the opposite.
It could go either. It depends. You're never going to get an accurate account either way. It's going to be either a lot older or a lot newer, depending on which method you use. I don't remember which one's which.
Sure.
Yeah.
So then maybe you wouldn't accept my example.
I can send you a paper on that I think Fiona Robertson, if I can get a hold of her, she did a wonderful breakdown of Steve Austin's errors that he made in his argon dating, and I'll send that to you.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'll take a look. But still,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean,
the assumptions we make, though, when people say, "Oh, well, science makes certain assumptions," there's really good reasons for it. Like I said, is there any reason you can think of why decay rates have not changed? That's the assumption we make. Decay rates have not changed. Can you think of a reason why that's a bad assumption? And let me bear in mind here, if the young Earth creationist narrative is true, if accelerated decay does exist, and if decay rates have changed, it also changes some very, very important fundamental constants, like the speed of light, like the fine structure constant, like the electric and magnetic constants. So much so that atoms would not form if young Earth creationism was correct. Literally, because of the accelerated decay, and we just had massive amount of hangouts on this with Dr. Kevin Hankey and Dr. Gary Lachelt, explaining that because you have to account for all this radiometric energy, all this radiometric decay, it would, one, liquefy the Earth, it would liquefy the crust because it's so much heat. It's called the heat problem. And in fact, it's on ICR's one of 3 things they haven't resolved yet, one of 3 major problems with young creationism that even they admit is a problem. And it would cause things not to form, like hydrogen, because you would never be able to get the electron to bond with that proton. You would never get an actual atom because of the problems with the electric and magnetic constants. So the problem we run into is when a young Earth creationist scientist posited all these things, and they say, oh, well, yeah, radiometric decay rates, is this an assumption? Okay, great. Yeah, it is. But they need to explain why that assumption is wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's more than just the dating systems. I mean, like you said, there's all sorts of kind of wild things that can go on with the dating systems based on what you date. And still, like, I'm not as well versed in the scientific field as you seem to be. So this is all
I just
something.
make it up as I go along, dude.
So
no, I mean, all the cards on the table. I'm not an expert in anything at all, but I did graduate from Naval Nuclear Power School. I attended Atomic Power Labs. I was a supervisor for 2 reactor core systems, S1C and D2G. So I do know a little bit about atomic physics for some degree. I have the equivalency of a bachelor's degree in nuclear technologies, but I didn't finish it. So, and we have a nuclear engineer in our live chat who actually went to the same school I did. So he knows exactly the courses I took, because he took the same things in Naval Nuclear Power School. So he's like, Steve wasn't a nuke. Yeah, okay, average Joe. Yeah, let's talk about reactivity addition rates and point of adding heat, average Joe. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, even still, like, I still feel thoroughly unequipped to even start to dialogue about these things. And all I can really say is that, yeah, I mean, young Earth creationism is a presupposition that I'm still working out today. So there may come a time where maybe I drop that and maybe I become an old Earth Christian, but still,
you mind if we continue with it another time? Because I can tell you, I've actually helped people leave young Earth creationism. Wayne Fillmore was a young Earth creationist. I debated him on macroevolution. He came back about a couple hours later, realized I was right. About a month later, he left young Earth creationism. Hunter Bailey, he left young Earth creationism. My goal is not to change somebody's theological beliefs. I don't know if you looked at my playlist, but I have a lot of theologians and a lot of Christians that come into my channel that are scientists. Dr. Hugh, you know who Dr. Hugh Ross is?
I've heard the name, but I'm not super familiar.
He's an astrophysicist. How about Mary Schweitzer? She's the one that did all the dinosaur blood.
Yeah, I've heard that.
They all come to my channel. So Dr. Hugh Ross, Dr. Fazrana, Dr. Mary Schweitzer. I'm not there to change anybody's theological position. I leave that for other people in the community, in the Great Bay community. If they want to argue against theology and theism, they can do so. My goal is to get people to recognize the actual science. And so if you want to continue the dialogue, if I can lead you out of young Earth creationism to an old Earth or a theistic evolutionist position, my job is done. As far as
theistic evolution will probably never happen, but there are still.
Wayne said the same thing. Now honestly, he's so on it. He's like, "Oh my God, how was I ever wrong on that before?"
Honestly, anyone that's a theistic evolutionist, I will debate, because you're either
love it.
You're either an old Earth Christian with maybe a young, like I don't know, Adam and Eve, but if you're a theistic evolutionist, that doesn't work theologically, and I'll debate anybody who wants to talk about that.
I tell you what, I can make that happen. No, I mean, I'm not a theistic evolutionist, so I can't really debate you on that. But
yeah, but either way, yeah, we can do that in the future. But still, I just want to say that, Steve, I think what you're doing here is great, and I'm enjoying the debate. I'm enjoying the conversation. So I'm definitely willing to learn and to kind of explore these options. So thank you for just kind of getting me on this.
You know what? That's awesome, because that's the whole point of the Great Debate community. That's why we have it. That's why I have this channel. That's why people support this channel via Patreon and other sources. I'm glad that they get something out of it, and I'm very thankful for my patrons. Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't seem to realize that. I think there's a conversation to be had with a lot of people. And I understand we have dealt with a lot of people in the community that have very radicalized views that get a lot of stuff wrong. But when I find something like Eric, that's the target that I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a younger creationist that's the fruit on the ground that doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. I want somebody like Eric that's willing to look at the data, who's articulate, is obviously not an idiot. That's
Some would say differently.
Some would say differently. Yeah, there's some people in my live chat that said differently. I'm a little bit more forgiving, but we'll definitely continue the dialogue. I will get people more involved. I will find you a theistic evolutionist to debate. So you're actually in the Great Debate community now, right? You actually joined the channel, the G Plus. I don't remember.
I don't know how to do that. Maybe you can just kind of guide me on that a little later.
Sure. The Great Debate community is on G Plus, but we're expanding beyond that. We are so much more than just a G Plus community. We are a community, a network of channels and people that want to have rational conversation with people. And yeah, granted, most of the people in the community are atheistic. I get that, but there's a lot of theism, in it as well. I think it's all about the conversation. So as long as we're having a dialogue, I'm entertained by it, and I think it's productive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right on. I feel you.
Awesome. So I'm going to bring this to a close. I want to thank my live chat. We had a constant 65 people watching, and everybody who's waking up now who wants to start over again. DVR, it works. You can go the beginning or wait till this uploads. The link to join the Great Debate community is in the video description. The link to THiNKeasy, Eric's channel, is also in the video description. Come on, give the guy some subs. You don't have to agree with him to be sub to him. Hell, I mean, I'm subscribed to a lot of channels that I don't agree with.
I got beer reviews on there. Anybody that likes beer will enjoy my channel.
How could you not like beer? Go watch videos on IPAs, guys. Come on, at least get him to 300. I mean, I told him we're getting him to 300. We're 12 shy. So go to his channel. I'll put it once again in the video description. Get 12 more people to go sub to him, and I feel like I've accomplished something. So that, guys, we're going to bring this to a close. Thank you, Shannon. I know you went to bed, but thank you very much for your number 4 special edition here, and allow me to kind of step in it a little bit, because usually Shannon does this by herself, but since this was a little more sciencey, I kind of want to take a part of it, because I like these subjects. I like biology and I like science. So sound good? You want to get the last word? Be my guest. Take it away. Plug your channel and say goodnight.
Yeah, sure, guys. Anybody in the audience that has been listening to this, thank you for listening and for taking an interest in these things, because these are serious issues and they determine how we live our lives. And so the fact that you've taken initiative to listen to something like this speaks volumes for your character and for what you believe, what is important. And so whether you're an atheist or a theist or anything in between, just thank you for being a part of the conversation. And my channel's THiNKeasy. It's not necessarily what the criticism has been that I think easy. It's a conjunction between speak easy and thinking as in apologetics. I do beer reviews as in speak easy, and I like to think, so I do apologetics. So that's what it's for. But I do beer reviews, I do short films, I do apologetics, Christian apologetics, and textual criticism videos for the history of the Bible. And I'd love to have your subscription and your comments on my videos for challenge. I hope you've seen that I react well to challenge, and I hope to do more research on things that I'm challenged on. So thank you, everyone who's listening, and thank you, Steve, for putting it together.
And you're welcome, and good night, all.